Hello and welcome to the Warcraft Academy guide to Malkorok Heroic. For this guide I'll assume you already know how the fight works on normal. If you don't, click at the top to view our normal mode guide. You'll want to use 2 tanks and 5 healers for this fight on 25 man and 2 tanks and 2 healers for 10 man. Malkorok has a very tight enrage timer on Heroic and is very demanding on healing. If you have good gear, it might be possible and safer to do the fight with 3 healers, but this will require you to have very good DPS. The main difference on Heroic is the presence of small orbs that spawn at the location of random players constantly. They take a few seconds to spawn, but once they appear, if you run into them, your entire shield is removed and you take 150,000 damage to your health. Now, since healing done will go immediately back towards your shield, this means there is no way to recover the lost health. So if you run into too many orbs, you'll eventually have barely any health left. This also means you have to be extremely careful when you're running to soak the void zones. If you run to a void zone and accidentally run through an orb on your way, your entire shield will be gone when you try to soak, so your health will take the full 600,000 damage. If that doesn't kill you outright, you'll be left on extremely low health afterwards with no way to recover it. It's very important that you're tracking the strength of your shield. You can either watch your debuffs or use a weak aura like this one, which I've linked in the description. If it's green, your shield is at full strength and you're safe to soak. If it's yellow, it's at medium strength and you may take some damage, so you may want to use a small cooldown. And if it's red, you're in extreme danger and should either ask someone to soak for you or use a major cooldown to survive. If there is nobody else able to reach your void zone in time, stay in it anyway and call out for last second healing. Even using a health stone in the last second can help. Even if you do die or drop to low health, it's better than letting the void zone explode, so never let a void zone remain empty just because you're worried about your own survival. Most of the time though, you just need to pay actual attention to where you're running, and it shouldn't be too hard to avoid the orbs. If you die because you run through an orb, it's your own fault, and this will be a major problem. Outside of this, he'll still do all his other abilities from normal. Seismic Slam, after it throws you up into the air, will spawn a living corruption under you. These mobs have an aura that affects anyone within 8 yards of them, which massively slows movement and casting speed. Whenever a player gets Seismic Slam, one of your tanks, or even a melee, needs to be on the lookout ready to taunt in every slime that spawns. A Death Knight can also just death grip them into melee. The main point is they get out of range and into melee as quickly as possible. They don't hit very hard, so they can just be kept in melee to be cleaved down. It's important to get them into melee quickly because their slowing aura can make it very hard for range to escape the arcing smash areas without dying. Those are the only mechanical differences to phase 1 of this fight. So you'll start with your range spread evenly around the room, just like on normal. Every time he spawns a void zone, one person runs to stand in each zone, but taking careful to avoid the orbs as they move. He'll do his 3 arcing smashes just like on normal, which you'll mark with a raid marker. After the 3rd arcing smash, he'll do 1 more test of void zones and then Breath of Yashiraj. So after the 3rd arcing smash, he'll stay in your assigned area, soak the void zone, and then after that get clear of the raid markers. After the 2nd Breath of Yashiraj, you'll want to move straight into melee range ready for phase 2. When he enters his Blood Rage, there are 2 ways you can handle it. Most guilds will simply stack up in front of the boss just like normal. Now, when people get displaced energy on Heroic, they're rooted on the spot, which means you can't just run out of the raid and get dispelled safely away from other people. However, you can use effects which break snares to safely remove displaced energy without actually triggering the explosion. The most useful of these is the Druid Stamp Healing Roar. You'll get 2 sets of displaced energy each stack phase, so you'll need 2 roars in total to remove each set. Simply pop the roar when the debuff is cast and it will be safely removed. You can also use personal removals such as Hand of Freedom, Unbound Will, Blink, or most other spells that remove snares. If someone gets displaced energy and you don't have any method to break snares, your only option is to move the raid 90 degrees to the right or left and then dispel the player once you've moved away, although this really is not optimal. There is one other way to do this phase which makes it a lot easier, and at least for 10 man should almost definitely be the way you do it. It's also possible on 25, but it requires specific tank classes. Have your raid remain spread out like in phase 1 and have your tank solo soak the entire cleave. The cleave does around 2.5 million damage on 10 man and 6.5 million on 25 man. If you have a Brewmaster tank, they can soak the entire thing alone thanks to their stagger ability and a high mastery reforge. They will need strong cooldowns and dedicated healing throughout the entire effect. They can use Zen Meditation and their other cooldowns to cover most of it, along with their Purifying Brew to remove the stagger, and then external cooldowns when they run out of their own cooldowns. Hand of Sacrifice, Barrier, Pain Suppression, Smoke Bombs, Warrior cooldowns, etc. should all be used to blanket him with cooldowns. If you're 10 man, you won't need as many cooldowns since the damage will be a lot lower, but he'll still want as many as possible. If you don't have a Brewmaster tank, a Paladin can solo tank it on 10 man just with Shield of the Righteous and other major cooldowns. It's probably not possible for a Paladin to solo tank on 25 man, so if you're 25 and you don't have a Brewmaster, you may just want to stick with the stacking strategy and use Stampeding Roar for each displaced energy. On 10 man, other tank classes may be able to survive it depending on gear and how many cooldowns you have available to you, or if they have Rook's Unlucky Talisman. You could also simply put 2 tanks in at once to split the damage between them, but then they'll both require dedicated healing. Look at your raid setup and decide what method will suit your raid most. If you're using a tank to soak, you don't really need to worry about displaced energy. You can still use Stampeding Roar to break it, for example if it's on melee, but if it's on your range you can simply not stand next to the person who has it. So other than deciding who soaks the cleave and how to deal with displaced energy, you also want to try to remove as many orbs as possible in this phase. Since you don't have a shield, you can run through as many orbs as you like, just as long as you get healed through the damage. Ideally you'll want people with rocket boots to run through the room and clear them all with an immunity or strong personal cooldown, such as a rogue, warlock, shadow priest or hunter. Alternatively, you can have one of your tanks run around soaking the orbs as long as he gets a few heals. The main point here is to have your room as clear as possible for going into the next phase. Once you've been in this phase for 20 seconds, it ends and you go back into the first phase. Try to use strong healing cooldowns as the phase ends so that everyone has full health when the shields return. Once you've done 2 stack phases, you'll have a short phase 1 again, and then he'll enrage, instantly killing your entire raid. The enrage timer is very tight, so that will be one of your main causes of wipes. That said, as long as you have moderately good DPS, as long as nobody dies, you shouldn't actually be having problems with the enrage. Most of the time, if you hit the enrage, it's because somebody died. In most cases, the thing you'll have most trouble with on this fight is the void zones. Either people will miss one and it'll explode, which is basically a wipe right then, or someone will run through an orb whilst running to one, lose their shield and die. This is why it's important to have a weak aura for the shield and to use a strong cooldown if they manage to mess it up. Sometimes your shield will be low from Seismic Slam even if you didn't run through an orb, so that can also be justification to pop a cooldown. To sum up, follow similar fight mechanics to normal, avoid the orbs that spawn under you. You can easily dodge them when they spawn unless you're extremely slow at moving. Soak the void zones that appear, but be careful not to run through an orb as you move to them. Avoid the arcing smashes and mark the areas hit, and avoid those areas until after Breath of Yusharaj. Taunt the slimes that spawn into melee and cleave them down. In the Blood Fury phases, use effects that break snares to remove the debuffs safely, or move away from people that have it. Either have your tank solo soak the entire cleave and leave your raid spread around the room, putting major cooldowns on your tank, or have everyone stack up in front of the boss and use strong raid and healing cooldowns to heal through the damage. Thank you very much for watching this guide, and if you have any comments or suggestions, please post them in the comment section below, and remember to visit warcraftacademy.com for all of our other guides for Siege of Orgrimmar. If you like this guide, please do subscribe, it really helps me out a lot, I really appreciate it. Thank you and catch you soon.